Check, check, check.
No, like I just like what it diamonds. All the
All
diamonds.
right, guys, let's jump back into it. So really quickly, do me a favor. One last thing we're going to do on this Viacom. So one last thing I want to do is, again, come into Photoshop, into Viacom. If you would actually select your type tool one last time, we're actually going to put another letter out here in this guy. I'm simply going to click. It should be somewhat close to what your media setting was before. And again, I'm simply going to type in a T. In my case, it's very big and it's sort of like in the way. So I am going to click out of it to go ahead and commit this. So that is the T right now. If you now hit the V key to get the move tool, you can move it down into place. I'm going to turn off the Viacom part so that it's not sort of in the way. So I've just got a big T in the middle of my screen right now. Everybody good on this? Perfect. Yeah, it can overlay. It doesn't need to be pretty. But at any rate, if you come up to the type menu and you come down, you can say, you can actually convert this to shape. And when you do that, this has actually now been made a path. So to make sure that that is true, if again you click on the path selection tool, you will see that you've actually got points on this. If you click and move the point, you actually move the path like that. If you click on the white-headed tool, though, the direct selection tool, you can modify just a single point on this path. So again, you would want to click out of it, make sure that you've got the white tool selected, click on this guy again. I'm going to click and drag across it to, oh, you got to make sure that the text layer is actually the active layer. Mine had dropped down to the other one. And then again, simply click on this. You will have all the points now, but in my case now, because I'm using the white tool, the white arrow, only this one black point is active. The other are actually hollow, so they're not going to change. And you can actually change the path that describes this T. And this is just to show you that, again, text is a path. So this is now my modified, this is what the T looks like in Verser Sans Serif. It's actually such an obscure font, you can't read anything. But at any rate, I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood that text is all made up of paths. It's exactly the same thing. These are, and that's why these things can be scaled mathematically. The edges of this have got nothing to do with a pixel, with a rasterized image. They all have to do with simply mathematical descriptions of position. That's what a vector actually is. Are there questions about this? So I created a type layer. I moved it down so that I could actually see it. I turned off my other guy. If you make sure that the type layer is actually the active layer, come up to the type menu and you come down and you convert this to shape. A shape, again, is a mathematical description. So, and you click on that, and if you've got either one of these path selection tools selected, you'll see the points that are making up the T. And again, you can then use the right selection tool to click and drag out, just change a point on this guy. This is actually going to move my whole path and modify any part of it that you want. Okay, did that work? Okay, good. You can close this guy up. This is, again, I don't think part of your homework, so don't save, you don't have to save that. However, and the next part is not part of your homework either, but it is a practical use of actually doing a path. So in your in this week's folder, there should be this file that's called m_7027_02191.cr2. If you simply double click on that, it'll bring it into Photoshop. You can open this either as an object or as a image file. It doesn't really make any difference. It isn't going to matter as far as what we actually do on this guy. So in this case, I am actually going to use the pen tool to outline this girl. Now you can see that in a lot of cases, there's stuff here that probably would work well with some of the automatic selection tools. The reason I'm actually using this file is that this is going to give us a combination of both image selection based on luminosity as well as the pen tool. So I've used this image before. I'm just going to continue to use it now, and you'll sort of see what's basically going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pen tool to outline the girl, most of her. I can't use the pen tool to outline her hair, so we're going to have to go to plan B for her hair, but hopefully what we're going to do is actually build a perfect selection of this girl. So again, I am going to start doing this with the pen tool, so either select the pen tool or hit the P key. And then as you zoom in, again, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to start on the lower right part of her skirt. I'm going to start in this area right down here. I kind of want you guys to start in the same place that I do. You could start in a different place, but this, at least if you start here at the same place that I do, this will all seem familiar. Or we'll be hopefully on the same page. Now, one of the problems, and I'm actually going to steal the mouse off of this guy because I'm going to do this also pretty fast. Oops. It doesn't matter. You can use either one. Oh, great. My mouse has got such a short cord, it won't fit on the right side of my tablet. So I may not be using my mouse after all, a mouse after all. All right, so anyway, actually, I'm not gonna. So the problem I've got is, again, with all the tools this happens with when we were looking at doing some of the overlay brush work on the image we were working on last week, the one that was just the very beginning of Sunny when we were working on that blue background. One of the problems is the minute you actually try to use the pen tool in this area right here to sort of start my whole path that's going to run up the side of this girl's dress, the problem that I've got right here is the minute I sort of like get to the edge, it stops becoming the pen tool and it just becomes the cursor for the mouse because I'm going outside of my image. So again, to get around that problem, we want to work on the pasteboard. To get to the pasteboard, you hit the F key once. The F key will take you to what, again, they call it pasteboard. You'll see my image is now surrounded by gray. Again, if you hold down the space bar to temporarily get the hand, you can move this guy around. If you hold the space bar and the command key, you can actually click to zoom in on this. But now with the pen tool selected, I can actually start my pen selection way outside of here on the pasteboard. It doesn't have to actually be started on the image, although there'd be no reason to really do that, but I could do that. So I'm going to go back in history again before any of that actually started, to start fresh. To get beyond this and to get, because you'll see right now, once you're on the pasteboard, you don't have the little stoplights up at the top to get rid of, to close an image or to make it drop, to send it down to the dock. You don't have that anymore. To get to there, you need to use the F key again. If you hit the F key one more time, you get the black pasteboard and you lose all your tool palettes. If you hit the F key one more time, you go back to the way your image was originally. This is no longer the pasteboard. This is where my tools will not work outside of my image. I do have the control of the stoplights up at the top. So anyway, I'm gonna hit the F key one more time to, again, get back to the gray pasteboard that keeps all of my tool palettes but also lets me work outside of the image. Then I'm gonna zoom in on this guy, and how much you zoom in depends on you, but I wanna talk about this. I'm gonna come in relatively tight. You can actually work in, there's a whole discussion about how tight you actually do come in to do this work. Obviously, the more zoomed in you are, the more precise of a path that you can actually make. The more zoomed out you are, the more generalized it will be. So a lot of it's going to depend on the work you're doing. If you're generating a path that you're going to use to build a selection just to control tone or color, it doesn't need to be as precise as the path that you are going to use if you were going to actually knock this girl out and drop her onto a different background. So a lot of it has to do with intent. But what I want to talk to you about is this right now, regardless of the zoom level and the intent, is this. I'm going to make a path right now, and I'm going to try to do as close to the line of the skirt, where this skirt is actually meeting the background, as I can possibly do. You'll see that there's a lot of fuzziness in here. I'm not going to be able to actually grab that part of my path. The path is again, the path is a very precise tool. It's much more like an X-Acto knife or a razor blade to cut this thing out. So I'm not going to get that part. However, I could later on use either Refine Edge or the new Refine and Match workspace to actually give me maybe a little bit better edge. But I'm actually going to abandon all of that and not really worry about that. But I'm going to ask you guys this question. I want to separate this girl from the background, whether I'm pulling her out, knocking her out to put on another background or not. I want to separate her. She's the most important part of this. So as I start to draw my path, I'm going to try to get as close to this thing as I possibly can. However, my question to you is this. If I have to make a mistake, if I have to err on one side as I draw this path, am I better off having the path be on her skirt or on the background? Why?
That's a different color. The background. If you see the color of the background, you get confused.
You're actually going down exactly the right road. Why did the people who say background think background? So let me ask you this. 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 If I do the path here, we'll do really extreme examples of this. If instead of even grabbing this, let's say I run my path right up the highlight right here, completely missing that edge line, but I run the path up right here and I cut the girl out of this. Is there any background? No, there is no background. She's separated. Are you going to know that that part of the skirt's missing? Probably not. It simply won't be there, right? The little edge of the skirt between where my path is right here and this edge right here, that little bit, if I run it up just on the inside of this and cut the girl out, I'm going to leave part of the girl behind. I'm going to leave part of the skirt behind, but I don't have any background. So then when I lift the girl and put her on someplace else, you're not going to know because there's not going to be any background there, right? If, on the other hand, I actually do it instead of just on if I make my mistake on this side of the skirt, if I make my mistake on this side of the background and then cut that out, I bring a hairline of the background with me into my new work. And I might as well not have done it. Does that make sense? So if you're going to make a mistake, you need to think about where you're going to make the mistake. What are you trying to do? What are you really trying to cut out? So I want to separate the girl from the background. So I'm going to try to get as close to this line as I possibly can. But if I can't get on it perfectly, I'm better off being slightly inside of the skirt than being slightly inside of the background. Are we good on that? So with that being said, I am actually going to start, and I need you guys to start as well. And we are simply going to start. Now, again, I'm going to show you how I do this. I want everybody to look at my screen really quick. When you start off initially, you might say to yourself, well, that is a straight line selection. If you leave it as a straight line, it will be obvious what you have done. You need, no matter how slight it is, you need to put a certain amount of organic curve in this so that it does not look like you took a ruler with an X-Acto knife and made this slice. So watch what I'm going to do on my screen right here. I'm not, again, going to be too greedy. I'm going to simply click once. I'm going to put in just a small amount of bend. That's all it takes. That is no longer a perfectly straight line. I'm going to hold down the Option key, click, and get rid of the second point. Then I'm going to hold down the space bar to get the hand and slide the skirt down and continue to work up. Click and drag, small amount of curve in there, just to the inside of the skirt. Hold down the Option key, click and get rid of it. Finally, I'm going to come up to the fingertip. I need everybody to get up to this fingertip with me. Again, I'm going to click, put a small amount of bend in there, click and hold down the Option key and get out of this. So now I'm faced with a decision. Do I continue to travel up the side of the skirt and try to get this little bit of background right here? And the answer to that is no. Because once I get this little bit of background right here, I'm faced with coming right back down on the path that I've created, which I cannot do. Once I go past this and I'll go right along the line of that finger, I've eliminated that. So the trick to it is this. When you are doing paths, you do the entire outline first. Then you come back. Remember the O and the Viacom that we did? This little center part right in here, this little center background part, this little part right here, let me show you on my screen so you know in the video. This little part becomes its own separate path that you do after we finished outlining the entire girl, just like the O was inside of the O in Viacom, right? You do the entire exterior of the girl. When that path is complete, you come back and you do the holes like this. You come back and get this hole. However, this space, this part of the background right in here is still a part of my outline. This is still part of the outline of the girl. So I'm up at this point right here. I need everybody to look at this because this is the last thing I'm going to show you about the pen tool. I've actually taken this point too far. You can see right now, I've gone past where the finger actually touches the skirt. This thing has gone too far. You have two options. The first one I told you about, which is the simplest one to remember, is simply to hit Command Z to undo it. And then again, that gets rid of the second line. Hold down Command Option Z to go back in history to reset that point so that it is correct. However, there is another option, and I'm going to go back in history to go back to this. I'm going to get rid of this point. There is another option that you've got, and it's the last shortcut key that I'm going to show you about the pen tool. While you've got the pen tool is selected, instead of the option, if you hold down the Command key, you temporarily get the direct selection tool, the white-headed arrow, and then you can click on this point and you can relocate it. And then let go of the option key and continue your path. So I want everybody to finish continuing this path around the outside of this girl. And look, one more time, this is the last thing I'll show you until we get up to the hair. When you get to this part right here, a lot of people's temptation is to simply treat this as a perfect point right here. That would not exist. This is a small curve in here that you have to do. So in order to get that small curve, I'm going to zoom way in on this so you can see what I'm talking about. I would not come off of this point like this. That makes this point way too sharp. Instead, what I'm going to do is come over here, click, and pull a curve in there to give myself a rounded shape that's inside of this. And then again, continue. Hold down the Option key and click to get rid of that and continue. So I need everybody to continue their path until they actually get, and I'm going to zoom back out. This is where I want you to stop. When you get up to this point right here, all of this, when you see where this hair is on this girl's collar, when you reach that point, stop. If anybody's having a problem getting this to work, sing out now and I'll come over. Otherwise, I'm going to do the same thing you guys are doing. Oh, one other thing. Stop. I need everybody to stop. I'm sorry, it was a huge mistake. I forgot to tell you this. So you're not going to see this on the video, but you will see it on the whiteboard. So then the question becomes, where do you actually put your points? Okay, so the way I think of this is that I do this still to this day subconsciously, and I've been doing this work for a very long time. Subconsciously, I always think of hills and valleys, and I always say to myself, sides of the mountain, sides of the mountain, sides of the mountain. And this is why. If you imagine that this is a hill, and then this is a valley, and this is another hill, and another valley, right? So that you sort of get this part, the metaphor, right? Sort of the top of the hill, right? So here's the trick. This pen tool is really good at drawing curves. You want the tool to do the curve for you. So, for instance, you could start like right here and draw a point. Now, some people would get really ambitious. Some people not so ambitious. Some people would actually say, okay, I'm going to set a point right here and stop right here, and I'm going to describe this line. Mistake. You are throwing away the power of what the pen tool does. What the pen tool excels at is the curve. So what you do, you pick this point here, but then you would pick the point here to let the tool do the curve. This is the side of the mountain. This is essentially a straight selection right in here. You don't really need the pen tool to describe this area right here. You need the pen tool to describe the bend, the curve. So your next point would go over here. Again, always think of hills and mountains, hills and mountains. Where do you put your points? You look for the sides of the mountains. You look for areas that allow you to actually use the tool to do the curve. So you can see points right here on both sides of the tip of that finger because I'm using the tool to describe the curve. Much better than putting a point here and then putting a point at her fingertip. At that point of the game, I've pretty much rendered the tool useless. It's not really going to be as effective. Does that make sense? So you're constantly looking for the sides of the mountain. That's the only way I can really describe it. It's the way I keep describing it to myself. So for instance, this area that I'm looking at right here, this would be a valley right here. You do not want to put a point right here in the middle of the valley. You want to go to the other edge of it and click to drag so that you describes that curve. You'll also see that I've actually cut into this hand somewhat. Is anybody going to know that part's missing? Nope. Again, right here, I transition from this part of the knuckle into, this is a hill, this is a valley. So my transition point goes right here on the side of the mountain to actually describe that part. And then I continue on. Don't you love it that I give you a blurry image? Right? There's a reason. Isn't there always a reason? Sometimes, and look at my screen really quick, sometimes when you see like the scalloped edge of this, sometimes there really aren't any valleys. Like this place right in here might actually be a point that you really just slam right into, in which case, again, using that option key to get rid of that second point is exactly what you would want to do. Again, to just continue to travel on, to move my image around, I simply add the space bar, I temporarily get the hand, and I can move my image down. Ooh, I'm looking at some serious chromatic aberration right here. Now, I know what you're saying to yourself at this stage of the game right now. You got to be fucking kidding me. How long could this possibly take? How many in this room have spent using, you try to do, the one I always love is people who do mask work with a paintbrush and you try to paint in a selection and you overshoot the mark. And so then you go back to either the black or the white paintbrush, the opposite of what you're doing, and you paint it back out again, and then you start to paint it in again, and then you paint it out again, and then you paint it in again, and then you paint it out again, and you just get frustrated because after an hour and a half, you still got this really shitty selection of this girl, and then you like go, God, I really wish I'd listened to Verser and just done the fucking path to begin with. Or I really wish I had that address of that factory in India where I could send this off at 9 o'clock tonight. It would be back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with all the paths perfectly done, and it would cost me $1.50. Now, I realize that might actually sound somewhat inflammatory, but it really is not meant to be. That's really the truth. And once I get up to the collar, where the hair actually meets the collar, I'm actually going to stop right there. And I'm going to wait for you guys to catch up. How are we doing? You already did. Good, good. It's working for everybody. Yeah, good job, good job. Remember, you don't want to create more points than you absolutely need to. So don't make the points like too close. You don't need a million points. You need to describe it. Don't be too aggressive either. It's a sort of a combination of doing enough points but not too many. I see sometimes people, when they first start out, they'll do 1,000 little points to describe 1 inch of some garment, and you've got way too many points. Other people will get too greedy about it, and they'll do this just gigantic, try to get these gigantic selections going, which doesn't work either. So anyway, just saying. Yeah.
So it looks like
Yeah, it's like, so you just go back in history and get rid of some point until you get back. It looks like you've got two that are almost right next to another. It looks like that there was, when you went to do the option key and click the second one, every now and then you haven't held down the option key and you put a point so close that you don't know what's going on. So again, it's just easier to go back in history to get rid of it. Perfect. Okay, so if you're not quite there, don't worry about it. You don't need to finish the path where you're at. Just come up to the very top where I am. Again, this isn't something we're going to do for homework. You've got enough of an edge that you can establish to see how this works. For the rest of you who are actually there, that's actually fine. So what I've done is I've reached the point where the hair starts to become the outline, and I can't use the pen tool to do this anymore. Well, I could try, but that would just be a nightmare. So I'm going to give up on the pen tool right now as far as going after the hair. We're actually go up there after that in a completely different fashion. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to start to travel over to the other side to finish my outline. So again, I'm simply holding down the space bar to get the hand to move over. And what I'm looking to do is get over to the other side where the hair touches the other edge of her collar right here. I'm not worried about this thing traveling through her neck. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm simply trying to get back to this point. Does everybody see where I'm at? And I'm simply going to start my pen tool work there again and go down the other side. So simply click in this and again, finish your, just the exact same thing that you were actually doing before to finish to get the rest of this selected. Always looking for the sides of the mountain. Now, I will confess to you guys, if you watch this video on mine, you'll see a lot of times I'm actually not bothering to get rid of that second handle. As you start to get familiar with this, you can actually start to get a little bit more advanced with this guy. However, in the first 10 years of using the pen tool, I did exactly every single point. I used the Option key to get rid of that, and my path work was amazing. Now, I've actually gotten to the edge of this sleeve, so I need everybody to look at my screen really quick, and whether you've gotten here or not, I'm at the edge of the sleeve. I'm going outside of my image now. The pen tool can go way outside of the image. You don't need to worry about it. I'm going to simply look at what I'm doing out here. I'm simply clicking points outside of the image so that I can start to align the tool to go right back up this sleeve right here. So you don't care about the points that you're sitting out of here. Photoshop will deal with this stuff just fine, but I'm doing it in such a way that I can actually start to get to this point again and then go back after the rest of this sleeve. You'll get to some little details in here that you think to yourself, well, I can just blow right over those. Nobody will ever know that I just omitted that one or that I didn't do it. It's those little detail things that make your, if you include them, make your path in your selection seem convincing. So you do need to sweat a certain amount of the details. And I get to the bottom of the jacket, and it's the same thing. Just jump outside anywhere on the pasteboard. You don't need to worry about the points on the pasteboard, where they are. Just use that to your advantage to line up to finish doing your selection, to start the bottom of the coat better. And you can still do handles outside in the pasteboard as well to still control what's going, the curve that's on the inside. And then finally get to the very bottom part. So here, look at my screen really quick. I just want everybody to see this. So I've come outside now, and I'm just going around the pasteboard in a really big way to try to just get back to my original point. So this is what my path ended up looking like. So you can see there's areas here where I jumped way outside. Again, the stuff that's on the pasteboard, you don't need to worry about those at all. When you actually use this thing, it won't snap the points to the edge of this, but if you make a selection out of this, which is what we're going to do, it definitely will do that part. So again, you should be pretty well along the way. If you haven't completed this in its entirety, simply you can make the very end of your selection relatively rough. Go ahead and just jump out, come around the pasteboard so you can get back to the beginning part of it. Again, you'll have enough to see exactly how this whole process works. However, there's two things that we haven't done. One, we haven't dealt with the hair at all, but the last thing that we haven't done as far as paths go is that area that I was talking about in the very beginning. You need to zoom in to the hand that's on the left side of this image. This small little area in here still needs to be part of our path. So again, check your path, make sure that this work path is still active. As a matter of fact, at this point, I would actually save this path. So to save this path, again, in the path palette, which is where I'm at, click on the drop-down menu, come down to Save Path, and I'm going to call this Body. And say OK. With this still highlighted, this body path still highlighted, I'm actually going to do this small area right in here to get rid of that part of the background. Again, and you'll see that it's actually, well, it's very hard to see, but it is doing it on the body path. Okay. If we double click on the hand, you will actually zoom back out of this pasteboard and be able to see your image in its entirety. So this is the beginning. This is the work we've actually done on the body. And believe it or not, this is actually going to function better for us. We are going to load this thing as a selection. So again, I'm going to hover over the icon that is in the path palette. I'm not going to select it. If you select it, there's no reason to select it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It can be, but there's no reason to. If you hold down the Command key and you click, you will actually then load this as a selection. You will see that those little lines have gone away. However, the problem we've got with this, I want everybody to go into the Layers palette right now, and I want you to simply create an empty layer, a blank layer on top of this. I want you to hit the D key to default your colors to black and white. If black is not your foreground color, hit the X key to actually swap them so that it is your foreground color. On this empty blank layer, I want you to simply fill it with black. So again, the keyboard option shortcut for that, to do foreground color is Option Delete. To do background color is Command Delete. So fill this thing with black and hit Command D to deselect. Turn off the background layer so you can only see this guy, and zoom in and take a look at this selection. And what you'll see is that this thing has got this almost perfect razor edge to it. This is too perfect for the selection. This is not what we want. This would, again, if you use this to actually knock this girl out, it would look like you had gone in here with an X-Acto knife and done this. That's not really going to help us out. So instead, you can throw this layer away. I just wanted to show you the quality of the edge that you'd made. Turn on our regular layer again. This time, go back to Path. Load the body selection again. Hold down Command key and click on it. It loads it as a selection. But this time, before we're going to do the same trick. Go ahead and go back into Layers again. Make yourself another blank layer. But this time, before filling this with black, we're going to modify this edge. To modify this edge, you come up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Feather. And we're going to put a feather radius in this of like 1 or 2 pixels. The higher the resolution of your image, the higher this feathering radius is going to be. What it's really going to do, what a feathering radius actually does, it's simply going to soften that edge a little bit. So I'm going to try it with a 1 pixel radius. I'm going to say OK to this. It's just modified that selection enough. I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. I'm going to hold down the Option key and hit Delete and fill that, Command D to deselect. And now when you look at this edge, if you zoom into this edge, you'll see that it's actually been softened slightly. This, again, removes that like cutout effect that you would have if you did not modify your images at all. So I'm going to throw this guy away. Again, I just wanted to show you the quality of your edge. Go ahead and make your layer selection, your background layer active again. I'm going to double click on the hand to jump back out so I can see the whole thing. I'm going to click back on my path palette. I'm going to Command click on that again to load it as a selection. I am going to soften that selection edge just a little bit again, up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. A 1 pixel radius in my feather will be fine. I'm going to say okay to that. And then I'm going to save this selection up to the select menu, down to save selection, and I'm going to call it body. And say okay. And you will notice Command D to deselect. You will notice that at the bottom of your channels palette, indeed is the selection that you just made and saved. It's right here called body. So this is the beginning. Now I actually need to add the hair to this. How do I do that? Exactly. I go just what you did with Sunny. I'm looking for a channel that gives me the best separation between this girl's hair and the background. So I look at the red channel. I'm not thinking that's the best one. The green is clearly better. It made the background slightly darker. Her hair is still staying pretty light. And again, I'm only looking at the edge of this girl. I'm not looking at anything else. So I'm going back and forth, and my guess is it's the green channel. What do you guys think? Green channel probably? Okay. So I'm going to copy the green channel. This is exactly what we did with Sunny. This is exactly what we did with that other girl's hair. Take the green channel, select it, drag it down onto the dog-eared guy at the bottom. This makes a copy of it. I'm going to double-click on the word green copy, and I'm going to call it temp hair. This is where some of you guys may have gotten into trouble doing Sunny, is you start making all of these channels, and you lose track of what channels are supposed to be doing what. If you name them, then they become, it's a little bit more obvious. So this is going to be a temporary hair selection. That's what I'm supposed to be doing with this. What would be my next move if I was going to, again, try to use this to knock out the hair? Again, levels. So I'm going to zoom into this hair. I can see that I've got a problem right here. I've got really good white on this hair part right here. I'm not going to worry about this part actually too much. This area of the window that's right behind her here, right here, if I get this area of the window to go black, this pipe or whatever it's the window casing right here, this will not actually be black. I am going to avoid trying to get this white triangle. I don't know what this thing is, but I'm going to avoid trying to get it because I'm afraid if I get this thing to go black, I'm gonna destroy the edge on this girl's hair. But I feel confident that this, like this area that's right next to it, this gray, it's pretty similar to all the lighter of the grays that are all around this. I feel like if I can get this guy to go black and her hair to go white, I feel like I'm going to have a reasonably good selection. Again, I feel like it'll get all of these parts down here. We'll see. So again, I'm going to pick the color sampler tool. I'm going to put one right here. Again, depending on which one you want to do first, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to click on the background one first, and then I'm going to click on one for her hair. Again, you get a readout in K. This is, again, because this channel right here can only be in black and white. So the readout by default that Photoshop gives you is K, which is the black ink of a black plate. But you can change these values to read RGB, which is what we want to do, because when we use the levels dialog box, level doesn't come in values of K. It comes in values of RGB. So that's what I want to be seeing on this. So I'm going to click on this drop-down menu on the little, right under the number 1, the little eyedropper, and come down and say that I want this to be an RGB color. I'm going to do the same thing for dropper number 2, again, RGB color. I'm going to hit Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. This is now the levels dialog box that I can control this in. It doesn't matter whether you set the white point first or the black point first. In my case, I'm going to set the black one first. So I'm going to click on this. I'm dragging and I'm watching my info palette the entire time. I hit a 2 and I stop using this slider because you can take that too far. I'm stopping using the slider where this is at a 2, and I'm going to my arrow keys now. And I hit 1 up arrow and I hit 2 up. These are now been zeroed out. I'm looking at the hair color on this girl, and the hair is actually still pretty blown out because the place that I picked is white. I'm going to go looking at this area in the back of her head right back here to see if there's any tone in here. And you can actually see that there is tone in here. I'm reading like a 248 on that. That's what I'm sort of seeing in this area. So if this happens to you, you can cancel out of this slider. You can then still, with the color sampler tool selected, you can click on this number 2 and you can move it to this area that's back here. Again, I'm not going to move it into this area in here, this darker part of her hair, but this part of her hair that really should be blown out, I can actually pick up this color, and you'll see I'm reading in the 250s now, not the same as that 255. So this is probably a better point for me to work off of. Then again, Command L to bring up the the devil's dialog box. Some people might think of it. Anyway, I'm going to click on the black point and drag it up, watching my info palette the entire time. I'm not watching the girl at all. I went too far. I got to zeros. That's too far. I'm backing off till I actually have a positive number in that. And once I get to positive numbers, I've stopped. I've got 10 in there right now. I go to my arrow keys and I tap them up just till I get to the last arrow key that gives me a 0, and I stop. I go back to my other white point slider. I start to kick it back. I hit 255 way too quick. So I'm simply going to click on that point and then actually just go to my arrow keys right off the bat and tap it down until I hit the very least that I need to do to get 255. And I ended up, your mileage is going to differ slightly, but I ended up with a black endpoint level of 72 and a white input level of 248. That has given me a pure white on the background here and a pure black in this background. Then before you say okay to this, you need to look at the quality. I don't care about this girl's body. Well, actually, I love her. No, that sounds like Donald Trump, doesn't it? Hey, just grab her tits. Or I haven't seen what he really said. All I've seen is the blurred out version or the little stars. So I've clearly got to go online and find out. I mean, I have some clue about his second phrase. Anyway, I get distracted. Okay, I'm back to focus. Focus. Okay, all right, focus. Okay, before you hit okay to this, you need to look around and make sure that this is doing the job you want it to do. I've got a little iffy work that's going around here. I'm not going to worry too much about her nose. I'm not going to worry too much about her lip. I'm not going to worry too much about those guys. I think I can get those all with an overlay brush. I'm feeling good about this. I don't worry about the inside of her hair at all. I know I can paint that with a brush. I'm really just concerned this thing in the background right here is making me a little nervous, but we'll deal with that as best we can. But for the rest of the part, it actually looks like it's pretty good to me. Again, if you use the preview check mark, I want you to use this on and off, on and off. Am I keeping the quality of hair that I want? I'm losing just a little bit of the hair right up here. This guy's breaking up for me. But the rest of this has got such good quality to it. I'm going to sacrifice this part right here. I'm going to say, screw that. I don't need everything. This is a not necessarily perfect world. So I'm going to say okay to this. This part's working out well for me. I am going to go back to my tablet now, because this is going to be brush work. And I'm going to hit the, if I can find my stylus. Oh, that's not a good sign. Okay, well, I'm not going to be doing this on a tablet. I'm going to be doing this with my hand, but that's okay. Again, I'm going to zoom into this guy. I'm going to do the easy part first. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to hit the D key to make sure that my background foreground colors are defaulted. I'm going to go up to my drop-down menu and make sure that this is a hard brush, because again, I don't want to overspray anything out into the background back here. I'm going to use the bracket keys that are just to the right of the P key to make my brush a little bit smaller. That's the bracket key that was exactly next to the P key, just to the right. The one that's to the right of it will actually make my brush larger, but I'm going to actually make it smaller here. Again, I'm not worried about her body down here. Once I get to this part down here, you'll see where I'm looking at her chin right here. The actual, my path actually starts at this point right here. So I'm simply going to click to get that point to white. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do the same thing to get rid of all of this. I'm avoiding this area right here. I'm going to do this stuff here with an overlay brush. But I can get the whole rest of this guy out here to actually go to white. Again, I'm going to avoid this part right now. Down into her body, down to where I know that my path actually started again. I'm simply clicking over on the other side. I don't need to click any more than where I'm just at right there. I'm going to run up this side. Again, I'm avoiding the edge. I will get the rest of that edge with an overlay brush. So that digs out the rest of this part. Then I'm actually going to transfer my brush, blending mode of my brush, not my palette, which is actually, or my channel, because there isn't blending mode of channels. But my brush there is, and I'm going to change this to overlay. I'm going to zoom into this area down here. I am going to change my hardness of my brush to a medium soft one right now. I still want some control, but I don't want an edge that's as hard as this edge is right here. I'm going to make my brush smaller. First, I've got to get this flyout menu to go away. I do that by simply clicking up here in the top of the menu part. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller in order to control this, and I'm going to click and dig that part out of her hair. I'm going to stay away from this very outside edge right here because there should be transparency in this guy out here, but I know the rest of her skin should go. I'm repeatedly hitting this skin because my overlay brush didn't get it in the very first pass. So I feel pretty good about that edge. It's just a little bit of there I can clean up. I'm going to avoid this whole outer edge right here. I'm going to let that be what it is. I may soften it just a little bit. I'm using the space bar to give me the hand to move around. I'm on the back side right now, and I'm going to take care of that transition edge right there to clean out the last part of that. I'm going to avoid the edge that's outside of here altogether. In this area, I need to do a little bit of the work that's coming out. So again, I'm going to make my brush even smaller. It's still pretty soft, and I'm just going to clean up that. I'm going to stay away again from all the edges out there. I'm going to knock that part off. I'm going to take care of that part right there. Then by now, this area right down in here, I'm back to what my path is going to take care of. So that part's fine for the white. Now I need to take care of the black part, so I'm zooming into this area that's right here. And I need everybody to look up at my screen. This is a problem area that I've got right here. I don't want to damage this completely, so I am going to be more subtle about the work that I do right here. Instead of using 100% opacity here, I'm actually going to drop this down to like a 50% to do some softer work in here. And I just clicked and it got lighter. That's because white is my foreground color. I'm going to Command Z to undo that, hit the X key to get black to be my foreground color, and then I'm going to simply come in here, and I'm not going to go completely for broke. I'm going to sort of take care of some of that. I've still got some tone in there, you can see, but I'm actually going to leave it at that. I'm not going to be any more aggressive about that. I'm going to do the same thing in this area that's right above the top of her head. Again, I'm not going to be completely about that. But then this area where I've got that thing behind her, you've got to get this thing out. So even if it means you've got to sacrifice all of this hair, you're going to have to sacrifice it. So I'm going to go back all the way up to 100% opacity, still using a relatively soft brush, drag across this guy because I've got to get this part out. Again, the overlay brush will help preserve some of this. If this starts to look too fake, what the overlay brush is actually preserving, and it might, because these are little flyaway hairs right here, probably are a giveaway that I've done what I've done. I'm just going to get rid of them altogether. So I'm going to go back to a solid brush, a normal brush. I am going to change this back to a completely hard brush, and I'm going to simply eliminate those things that are just floating in midair, because these couldn't be a part of this. Now, this edge may or may not be perfect. Again, I've got a little bit of background in here that I might be able to finesse this edge with, make it a little bit softer. So again, I'm going to go back to an overlay brush. Black is my foreground color. I'm really going to drop my opacity down now. Again, I'm going to get around in the 30s. I'm going to go and hit this a little bit and not a whole lot harder than that. And I'm feeling pretty good about my mask right now. And I'm going to kick back out. There's one last area that's right in here where this hair goes across here. If you wanted to be really crazy about that, you could actually get this. I'm going to actually drag my opacity back up. Hit this with, that is too hard of an overlay brush. It's the edge is too hard. You see that really hard edge right there. Command Z to undo that. I'm going to go back to a completely soft edge now. Actually, not completely soft. I do 50% softness. And actually, I'm not going to care about that one hunk of hair that's right there. It's too much work for me to try to save it. So she just got a haircut. That's all. Then I'm going to finish taking care of this part right here. I'm feeling pretty good about that. You see why I want to do this with a tablet and not a mouse. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room. The rest of the background you don't need to worry about. All we're looking to do is establish this edge of hair on this girl. That's all we are looking to do. We're not looking to get any other background. So I'm feeling pretty good about mine. How are you guys doing? We good? Okay. I need to now use this guy. I need to add it to my body here. I need to add it to this guy. How do I do that? I load this as a selection. So again, let's look to see what that really means. If I load this thing as a selection, again, I'm just simply going to hover over the icon of the channel. I'm going to hold down the command key and click on it, and it loads it as a selection. But I want to do the same trick so you guys see what this edge really looks like or how this thing is really working. Again, let's add another layer on top of this girl, just a blank layer on top of this girl. Go ahead and turn the girl off so that you don't see her. So I've got an empty layer sitting on top. I've got the eyeball of the girl turned off. I do have this hair selection has actually been loaded. You can see it's right here. I am going to hit the B key, or you'll still have the B key as selected. Change your blending mode to normal. Change your opacity. If it's less than 100%, you need to be at 100% opacity, 100% flow. Make sure that black is your foreground color. If it isn't, again, hit the D key. That will default your colors to black and white. If white is your foreground color, hit the X key. That swaps you back and forth between black and white. Make it a large brush. You don't need to worry about how big it is now. You really don't even need to worry about the edge of it because this selection is going to control where you're allowed to paint and where you're not allowed to paint. And now if you simply click and drag across the outside edge of this girl, you will actually see what it looks like, the edge that you're actually building. Do not let go of your brush when you do this. Remember, we talked about this before. I'm going to zoom in and show you why. Remember, I said to you before that that selection that we have got is giving me this transparency right here on the edge. I simply did one pass with my brush. If I let go of my brush, the way opacity works, remember, you will then repeat this. So this opacity held back quite a bit of ink. If I come over and hit this edge again, watch what happens to my edge here. I hit it again. It makes it too dark. It destroys the quality of that transparency that I need to make this effective edge. So this is why you want to do this pass in one stroke. You do not want to let go of your mouse. You want to do it completely to do the entire set of hair that we're actually trying to do. So if you've done all this, you can throw this layer away. This was just to show you what that would actually look like. We need to then go back into the body channel because this is where we're going to paint. I'm going to zoom back out so I can see my body level right here. So what I've got on my body, it's already white, where this came from my pen selection. That's what's controlling this right now. I simply need to add the hair to this body channel. Is everybody good on what we're trying to do here? So again, I'm going to hit the X key to give myself white as my foreground color. And then again, I'm going to zoom out enough so that I can hit this entire hair in one stroke. And I can go over it as long as I don't let go of my mouse or do not lift my stylus from the tablet. You can go over this a million times to make sure that you've gotten the whole thing, and you will not build additional opacity. The only problem is if you lift your stylus off or you let go of your mouse and hit that edge a second time, then you start to lose that opacity. So I'm simply going to click and drag around this entire thing to make sure I've got it all, to make sure that part, it looks like I've gone a little bit over because there's part of the building up here that was still, that I didn't clean up in my initial selection. That's okay, I can fix this in 1 second. But now that I've got the hair that is in place, I'm gonna hit Command D to deselect. I'm gonna make sure that my brush now is a hard brush because I'm gonna clean up that little mistake that I just made up there. I'm going to hit the X key to make sure black is my foreground color, and I'm going to get rid of that little bit of background right there and that little bit of background right there. And I am done with this. I'm going to turn my eyeball back on my layer. I'm actually going to select the RGB guy, and then I'm going to double click on the hand to zoom back out, and we're going to see how well we did. Did everybody end up with a body mask that looks something like this? Well, right now, if you did, you should be saying to yourself, this is my ticket out. Because I can do this. People won't pay me $9 an hour as a retoucher. People will pay me $90 an hour as a retoucher. If I really finesse this well enough, I might actually get up to the $300 an hour. Top-end retoucher in New York is making $2,500 a day. Now, you got overhead, don't get me wrong. It's not like you're going to pocket that, and it's not like you're working every single day. But those are the kind of prices that those guys are commanding. And guess what? Look at your fucking mask. Look at this. Are you kidding me? So let's use this guy. I'm going to load it as a selection. Simply command click on it to load it as a selection. I'm going to click on the RGB channel so that I've actually got something to work with. And we can do all sorts of things. We could actually put this on its own layer. So this is actually going to be weird. I actually hit Command D to do a deselection first. Let's make another copy of this layer. So I'm simply going to drag this down to make a copy of it. And I'm going to go ahead and rasterize it because I want to actually isolate this girl out. So I simply drug the smart object down. If you've only got an image, that's okay. Do the same thing with your image because you wouldn't want to touch a virgin. You need a virgin copy of this layer anyway. So the second guy up here, I'm going to go ahead and rasterize it so that I can cut it out. So again, up to the select menu. I'm sorry, not the select menu, the layer menu, down to smart object, and go ahead down to rasterize, or down to the rasterize menu, down to smart object. Either way, it makes this a normal layer that we can actually work on, that we can actually put a layer mask. Well, we could have put a layer mask on this before, or simply cut this girl out, but we'll see how this actually works. I am going to load this again as a selection, so command click to load this. I'm going to come over to this, to the second layer that I've actually done on here, and I'm simply going to click down here on the bottom to add a layer mask. And this should have knocked the girl out. If you turn off this layer, you'll actually see what this girl looks like on a blank layer, and we can actually zoom in and take a look at the quality of work you've done. Now, you might say to yourself, well, I can't really tell how good or not that is, so let's really test the waters and see how good we can get it. I'm going to click on the original background layer because I want to put a blank layer in between these two. So I'm clicking on my original layer, and then I'm going to click on the add layer to simply put a blank layer in between my original background layer and this layer that I've just knocked this girl out on. In this blank layer, I'm going to simply fill it with white. White is my background color. Hold down Command and hit Delete, and you've got this filled with white. So you can come in and look at the quality of the edge that you've actually got on this, and you can say to yourself, well, how good or bad is this? Is this right? Is this wrong? I actually look at this edge, and the part of this edge up along the top part of her coat I don't think is really all that well done, but the edge that's running down here along the side of her coat is flawless. The edge that's running down here along the side of her skirt is pretty flawless. The edge on the other side is actually pretty flawless as well. I don't really like what's happening around this hand area right here. We will talk about ways to fix that either next week or the week after. However, I do have an issue right up here, and it's her hair. And you look at it and you say, well, that's absolutely incorrect. Her hair, I mean, look at that. I can actually see that. What is the problem here? Say what? Yeah, I can see all the outlines of parts of this, right? And why can I see all the outline part of it? I shouldn't be able to see that, right? And here's the trick. This is what you need to know about this. If you turn off this, I'm going to leave my background layer on. What you see is that you've got this white hair against a dark background. And so when we put in this white background, it's deceiving. This is actually not, a lot of people would call this spill. This is actually not spill. Spill is when we did, remember at the very end of our last class, we had Sunny's hair, remember, that was on the blue background, and you could see the blue coming through. And we actually used a color to actually change that. Well, we could do that here in this case. If we were going to do that here in this case, you would actually select the image layer of the girl. Then you would pick a brush, the B key. You would make sure that this is a soft brush because we're going to spray this in. Again, you don't want to destroy any of the hair color here that is correct. And then you're changing your blend mode from normal down to color. That's how we remove spill. However, when you look at this, and then we would actually sample the color of her hair. So again, I would hold down the Option key, hover over this color of her hair, click on it, and it samples the color of her hair. And then I would come in, I'm working again, not on my mask layer. You can see I've got the bracket around the image layer, not the mask, but the bracket is around this image. And I could come in and I could try to paint this, and you don't see any change at all, even though this is 100% opacity, 100% flow. And the reason you don't see any change is if you zoom in and look at this, when I'm painting with white on this, what this white is really doing, it's the color. The luminosity of this is being controlled by the mask, not the color. This actually already is white, or in our case, It is a medium gray, but that also is the same color as white. Does that make sense? So this trick does not change the luminosity, it changes the color. So when you have spill like the blue in Sunny's hair, it changes that blue to the black of her hair and it looks correct. However, our issue here is not color, our issue here is luminosity. This is hair. If this background was really white, you would not be able to see this hair. You would have a blown out white hair on a white background. It would simply be gone. So the truth of it is you actually have to paint this area out with luminosity instead. And it's this slider, it's this blending mode right down here. When you do this, I'm going to zoom back out a little bit, you will see that the hair actually goes away. And a lot of people say, well, that's wrong. It's not wrong. This is exactly what would happen if you had this kind of lighting on this. If this girl was this much backlit on a white background, this is exactly the way her hair would look. That is a 255, 255, 255 white background. The entire edge of her hair was that same 255, 255, 255. So how could you have anything other than it be completely blown out? This would be the correction that you would do for this girl. Again, if you double click on the hand and zoom out, this is how she would really look in this situation. Does that make sense? However, if you've done that, I want you to undo it. So go back in history to when we actually did the fill layer where we've got the blue background down here. I'm going to actually throw this blue background away, and we're going to talk about other things that we could possibly do with the selection that we've just made here. One of them clearly is knocking stuff out, but that is not the only thing that you can do with a selection. So for instance, I'm going to load this selection again. Now I could go back to the body and command click and load it in the channels palette, but I can also do it right off the mask itself. I can simply hold down the command key, click on the mask. It's loaded this as a selection. Then I'm going to come down here to the adjustment layer, and I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to put a black and white adjustment layer on this. You will see that because I was on my background layer, that it just put this black, black and white layer in between these two. I'm not going to be able to see it between these two. So I'm going to simply drag it up to the top. And now you'll see that when you have an active selection going and you create an adjustment layer, that what that does is it actually puts a layer, it puts that selection as a layer mask on this. So now I've got a black and white girl. Does this work for everybody? I didn't want a black and white girl. I wanted the black and white background. So to change that, yes? Say what? Yes, exactly. I thought you said verse. Yeah, like verse or yeah. Exactly. You invert, you do the inverse of this. So to get this to invert, make sure that the mask is selected. And you will notice if you actually do select this guy right here, you've got some other controls. We should talk about this really quick. Look at the mask that we've actually got going right here. When you click on the mask, I'm going to click on this. If you click on the adjustment layer itself, in the properties palette, you get that adjustment. This is the black and white control right here. This was the conversion to black and white. But when you click on the mask, you'll notice in your properties palette, things change. This is now controlling your mask. What you'll see in your mask now is you've got density. And density, what density allows you to do is, a lot of people would say, well, you could just drop the opacity of this adjustment layer to 50%. However, you can control the density of this mask. If you click and drag this guy back, you'll actually see that the outside, that the selection in the middle is staying completely opaque, and that the outside now, that this outside edge is losing its blackness. So this background now is beginning to become black and white as well. And as you continue to drag this down, you can actually now control. Does that make sense what's going on here? You can actually see it happening in your mask. If you drop the density all the way down to 0, you essentially fill your background. Your mask is completely filled with white. If you crank it all the way back to 100%, you can also feather your mask. So if this edge was not quite what you wanted, if it was a little too sharp, you might possibly do it here. However, I would suggest not doing this here. There's better ways of doing this that we will look at later on. However, if we zoom into this guy and look at the quality of your edge right now, you are amazed at how good the quality of your edge is now that you use the pen tool with. If you want to see this inverted the way we just talked about, make sure that the mask is selected and do one of two things. Either hit Command I, which will invert it, or go up to the image menu, down to adjustment, down to invert. It does the exact same thing. Double click the hand. You've now got a color girl on a black and white background, which again presents all sorts of options and opportunities. So let's say, well, this is not enough. I want more. I want more. I want to do something else. Let's actually load this as a selection again. So I'm simply going to command click to load this guy. And now I'm going to put a curve on this guy. So again, down to adjustment layers and bring a curve up on this guy. And now I've actually, again, the very same thing has happened. I've actually got a curve that's got a layer mask on it. Nothing has changed because I haven't done anything to the curve yet, but I'm simply going to click on it and drag it down to make it a whole lot darker. And now all of a sudden, when you say, you've got an art director who's saying to you, wow, I really love that subject to pop more, and you do this, all of a sudden they go, oh my God. Yeah, how'd you do that? And you say to them, each and every one of them, you do not ever do this in front of a client. You say to them, that took me 15 hours to do, and I'm only charging you $50 an hour, so that'll be $750. And it really took you 5 minutes to do, and you're laughing all the way to the bank. And they say to you, well, I can't believe it took you that long. And you say, look at this curve. Will you look at what I built? Do you have any idea the hours that it took me to build this thing? Look at the quality of this. I had to trace every single hair. Have you ever tried doing that? 15 hours, consider yourself lucky. I'm giving you a break. It actually took me 20. I'm feeling really bad about charging you this much money for it. 1,000 seemed like I was gouging you. So $750 work? Sure. Are there questions about this? Okay. Last thing, I would save this file. If you hadn't finished doing the pen work, you could still work on it. It's not homework, so it doesn't matter. But if you want to, in order, again, to get out of the pasteboard, which is where we're at right now, you hit the F key once, you go to the black pasteboard, you hit the F key again, and you get back to what you are normally accustomed to as far as the Photoshop workspace. And then you can jump out of this guy and save it, and we're good to go. But again, look at your edge. Before you close this up, look at the edge quality of what you've just done. This is fucking mind-numbing. Look at this. Okay, pen tool, change your life. Okay, and we're gonna get rid of this guy right now. I'm gonna show you one last thing. Hopefully you guys have got a green screen file in here. I'm hoping you do. Shit. Oh, let's look in class 6. We'll even get ahead of your homework in class 6. Yep, we do have one. In your homework, in the class 6 files, in your assignment folder, there's this file. It's a girl on green. So it's 081025 VER underscore fashion copy. If you can, again, don't just double click on that because it'll probably open it up into, it won't open it up into Photoshop. So, we are going to learn how to shoot chroma key in this room, this class. So we will show one of these days later on. It's not next week, I don't think. It might be, so don't quote me on that. Clearly, I haven't read the Moodle. I never read this. Anyway, so at some point we go into the studio to actually shoot this stuff because, again, this stuff makes it much easier to do the kind of knockouts that we're actually talking about. So we're going to do a quick knockout on this girl. How would you guys typically select the green to actually separate it here from the girl? Magic wand is one thing. That would be how some people do it. Others, channels. Other people, people would look through the channels. That's actually going to be a part of your assignment. Some people would use the quick selection tool. Some people would use the new mask and whatever, space whatever. I'm going to show you guys a completely different trick, a completely different way of doing this that will actually hopefully give us a jump start on this. And at the same time, we're going to build an action. How many people in this room have never built a Photoshop action? Okay, no, sorry, don't worry. We're going to do this right now. What actions allow you to do is anything that you're doing in Photoshop that is repetitive. if you go through the same steps over and over and over again, every time you open a file, you're doing the same things all the time, over and over again. It gets to be a pain in the ass and an enormous amount of wasted time to actually do this. So we build actions to do that work instead. So we're going to do twofold right now. We're going to actually build an action to separate this, but I'm also going to show you the best trick in the world about separating green screen. I have a piece of software that does not what I'm going to show you guys, but it actually will look at this green and try and separate the girl from the green background. It costs about $350. What I'm going to show you guys right now works better. So there is no reason for you to go out and buy that expensive software when the tools inside of Photoshop will actually do it better for you. So you guys ready for this one? Okay. So to build the action, the first thing you need to do is come over to the action palette and you just simply click on it. Then there's a menu right here on the side of the palette. You click on this and a flyout will happen and you come down and you want to say new action. And a dialog box will come up and you want to name this action and we are going to call this zero selective color. So Z-E-R-O-S-E-L color, C-O-L-O-R, unless you're from Europe, in which case it's O-U-R, right? Okay, and we're going to hit record. From this point on, every single gesture that I make in Photoshop, no matter what it is, if I pick a tool, if I pick a menu drop down, if I add an adjustment layer, anything that I do in Photoshop is being recorded. The steps are being recorded. So the first step that you're going to do on this is you are going to come down here to the add adjustment layer, and the first thing we're going to actually do is add a hue saturation layer. We're not going to change anything in the hue saturation. We're simply going to add it. The second move we make is we're going to add a second adjustment layer. So right back down where we came from, second adjustment layer, and you're going to add this selective color. That puts a selective color adjustment layer up on top of the hue saturation layer. How many people in this room have ever worked with selective color? What'd you do with it? You just control color, right? Basically what you're trying to do. There's actually a reason. Selective color is actually one of the oldest things that happens in Photoshop. It goes way, way, way back. And what it was really designed to do, what its purpose was, it would allow printers, when you think about printing, a printing press with plates, there's 4 plates on a conventional CMYK press, not an inkjet printer, but you know, the big kind that they use to print newspapers and books and that kind of stuff. There are these huge presses that have 4 individual plates on it. One is strictly the cyan color, and it's strictly cyan ink on it. The next one is magenta, the next one is yellow, and then finally you hit a black plate. Photoshop realized that you could actually go in and control the amount of ink that was then contributed to each one of those plates. So that is basically what selective color was designed for. We're not going to do that with Photoshop. We're going to actually use it in a completely different fashion. To do that, you will notice that here at the very top, we have a red color is actually selected. And underneath it, you have inks. You have a cyan, magenta, yellow, and a K stands for black ink. This is where you could control the amount. You could say, okay, I want to reduce the amount of cyan ink that's printing in the reds on this printer plate. That's what this was originally designed to do. We're not going to do that. What we're going to do is this instead. There's a slider, and this is the only one you use, is the black slider at the bottom. If you take the black slider and you drag it all the way to the right, what you are saying to Photoshop is, I want you to flood the reds of this image with 100% black ink. Anything that is red, I want you to hit it with complete black ink. This is sort of a hard concept to get your head around, but because again, Photoshop is mathematical, there is a negative to that. The negative, what is the negative of black ink? White ink. Now, the concept of white ink is pretty foreign to everybody. Nobody really thinks about it. Again, it is an abstract, but it does exist in Photoshop. If you were to click on this slider and go all the way to the left to this -100, what you are now telling Photoshop to do is to take anything that is red in this image and flood it with white ink. Does that make sense what we're doing here? But in our case, we want to do this black ink. We want to flood this with black ink. So click and drag this guy all the way over. Then click on your drop-down menu and come down to the yellows and do the exact same thing. Flood the yellows with 100% black ink. Again, down to the greens. Flood the greens with, yes, 100% black ink. Don't worry, we'll change that in a second. Yes, because it does matter. The greens, 100% black ink. You're doing this for every single thing that is in this drop-down menu. Every single color, and then also all the tones, which would be the magentas, the grays, and the blacks. Everybody gets cranked all the way over. The neutrals, that's what the midtones are. And then finally the blacks. And your image should look black. If your image looks like it's this solarized thing, it's because this radio button relative has been selected instead of absolute. You want to make sure that absolute is selected, and your image should now be black because you took everything in that image and flooded it with black ink. So your image is now black. And that's all I got for you guys. It's been nice to see you. I'll see you next week. No, just kidding. So now that you've done this, back over to your action palette, and in your action palette, you will see this little square that's at the bottom of it. If you click on this, this is now, your action has now been recorded, and you'll see it right here. It's called Zero Selective Color, and if you click on all these drop-down menus, you will see it's all the steps that we just took to do this. To make sure that your action does work, I want you to throw away that selective color layer and the hue saturation layer as well. Throw them both away. Then come back over to your action menu and select the Zero Select Color action, the very top of it, the parent level. You don't want to start this. You could start your action somewhere in the middle. You don't want to do that. You want it to run the full thing. So I've selected the Zero Selective Color in my action palette, and then see this little arrow that's pointing to the right? If you click on it, it runs the action for you. It saves you having to go through each one of those panels and draw everything over to black. Although you'll see in my case, the one mistake it made is it still has relative selected instead of absolute. And that's actually because I actually made that change back and forth to show you guys what the difference was when I actually built the action. If I hadn't done that, this would actually be, have made it correctly. So this is great. I've got a black image. How can I possibly use this? Well, before we use this, go ahead and turn the eyeball off on both of those guys. I want you to just look really quickly at our channels. So again, if you simply click on the red channel or the green channel to unclick the, you've got to actually have your background layer selected to be able to select your channels. If you click on the red one, you say to yourself, because we would be looking for a channel to actually separate the green from, right? And you look at the red and you say, well, that's worthless. And you look at the green, that's a little bit better. And you look at the blue and that's worthless as well. So the green, this is the best I've got. I think I can do better. I just wanted you to have this in mind, what's going on here. I'm going to go back up to the RGB guy. I'm going to turn both of these guys on again, so my image is black again. I'm going to click on my selective color layer, and I'm going to go to my drop-down menu, and I'm going to go to greens. And then I'm going to flood the greens with white ink. I am dragging this all the way back, and I've now flooded the greens of my image with white ink. All the others are still black. But do you see the beginnings of the mask that I'm trying to build here, right? However, it gets better. Why is this just a middle gray or sort of a darkish gray? Why isn't this green down here? Why didn't it go to white?
Saturation.
What?
Saturation.
Saturation. It's not a pure green. It's as good as I could get when I shot it, when I shot that green background, but it's not a pure green. If you actually turn the layer off, the selective color, and you look at that green, you know that this is not a pure green. Is there a way I can make this green more pure? There's a hint in all of this. How do I make something more pure color? What is purity of color? Saturation. Can I boost the saturation of this image? Yes, I can. Can I boost just the greens of this image? Yes, I can. However, when you do this, so we're going to pick the saturation guy that's underneath. When you actually do this, you could conceivably go to this drop-down menu and come down to greens. I do not suggest you do that. I suggest instead you use the targeting adjustment tool. It is the little, so I've picked the hue saturation layer. I'm picking the targeting adjustment tool right here. It's the thing that looks like a hand with an arrow that goes both ways. You actually click on this, Then when you come over to your image, you'll notice right now that master has been selected. This would be saturating everything. I don't want to saturate everything. I just want to saturate the green. However, I'm not really sure exactly what this is. If you use the targeting adjustment tool, it will pick this specific color. If you then click on this color and drag to the right, you will saturate it. If you drag to the left, you will desaturate it. So I'm going to drag to the right, and you will see that the color now has become more saturated. However, I don't know how saturated this is really becoming relative to what I'm trying to accomplish here. So if you've done that, hit Command-Z to undo it to get this back to 0. Go ahead and turn on the eyeball of your selective color. You still have hue saturation is still selected, but selective color is turned on now. Now when you click on that targeting adjustment tool, again, if you click on it again, it turns off, and you'll see when you come over, you just get the hand. But if you click on it, it's supposed to look like a button that's been pressed in. That's what that darkness around it is supposed to be. Now when you come over and you click, Photoshop knows that you are talking about the green color that's underneath because this hue saturation is sitting underneath. Now you can actually click on this thing and drag forward, and you can actually watch the mask being created. Now you tell me, you remember the red channel that we had and the green channel that we had and the blue that we had? Would you consider this to be a better mask to start with? Hugely, right? So this is the beginnings of it for me. However, I need to turn this thing into a channel, into a selection that I can actually go in and work with on a paintbrush. Because I can still, you can't see it on my screen up here, but you can see it on your screens right there. You can see the eyeballs, the reflections there. I've got a lot of contamination. Look at all this contamination down here. I've got contamination in the background up there. I've got all sorts of skanky shit that's happening over here. This is not ideal right now, but this is one hell of a start, don't you figure? So I need to make this a channel. How do I make channels? How do I make alpha channels? We've done this a number of times in the past. I could copy something, but I'm thinking other ways that we've made alpha channels. Isn't every single time that you've actually made a selection and saved it, doesn't it become a channel? All of the rectangles that we drew out, saved those. Those became alpha channels. They're channels that had that in that, right? That's exactly what we're going to do. We're simply going to load the RGB as a selection. How do I load this luminosity as a selection? Command-click loads this as a selection. Right up to the select menu, down to save selection, and I'm going to call this knockout. And hit OK. Command-D to deselect. And if you scooch down to the very bottom, you will actually see the thing that we just built. And then we take off from here. Now, in this case, there's not a whole lot of other work to do. We could do a quick work. You'll see that the inside, the interior of this girl, for the most part, is reading. Actually, oh, look at this. Check this out. I am zooming around on the inside of this girl, and I'm expecting to get readouts on my info palette up here. I'm expecting to get shits in the zeros and that kind of stuff. Why are these numbers? These numbers are gigantic. They're up in the 212s and the 189 and the 165. They're not giving. It's not what I'm seeing at all. Why is that? What's happening? Look at my layers palette. What is selected in my layers palette? The hue saturation layer is the active layer here. That can't be. If the image is what's got to be selected. So if you click on the image to make it the active selection, even though I'm still only looking at this channel down here, you will now see that your readouts are correct. I'm now getting zeros in here. As I start to get out to the outside of her hair out here, this is all contamination. You can spot this. You can see I'm getting 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. You can see the contamination. There's a lot of it down here. I mean, the 207s, the 206s, all that kind of stuff. To clean this up really quickly, because we've got 10 minutes to do this. This won't be the final, but you should save this because this is not next week. This is not the homework for next week, but it will be for the week after. So we're already starting your homework 2 weeks out. Am I the nicest guy in the world or what? All right, so to finish cleaning this up, it's not going to be perfect. This edge over here is not going to be perfect. We will deal with him later. But to clean the rest of this up, again, I'm going to go back to the exact same trick that we've done before. I'm going to do a color sampler point, and I'm going to throw one down here, just kind of in this middle area of this background down here. I can throw another one in her hair right here. This part doesn't really matter. There actually is some contamination up in here, this upper part of her hair right here. So I'm actually going to move this black point somewhere right up in here just to get some rough idea. Again, I've got K readouts here, so I'm going to change these Ks to RGB readouts. I'm going to hit Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. I'm going to go after my dark one first, and it's point number 2 right now. I get it to 1, I stop. I go after my arrow keys, it's now 0. I go after my white point to try to clean that up. I'm going to drag it back. I get to like a 254, stop. Go to the arrow keys to actually try to get that. It clicks at 255. Before I say okay, I'm going to go in and look around this image, especially this edge right here. Again, I don't care about the work you've done in here, and I really don't care about the work way out here in the background. What I care desperately about is this edge. I care about the hair edge right here. Was I too aggressive about this? Use your preview button to go on and off, and I don't feel like I'm being too aggressive. I feel like I'm really keeping a pretty good quality of that and actually getting the majority of it out. I've still got a little problem in here. You can see it's reading in my readouts in the 246s, that kind of stuff. I'll hit this in just a little bit, but this is going to be good enough for me. My input values, if you want to match me exactly, were 6 and 187. 6 for the black input, 187 for the white output. I'm going to say okay to that. I am going to then go after this edge right up here, but to do it, I'm going to get to the pasteboard first, hit the F key so that I can actually use my brush to clean this area up. Again, I need my brush to be on the outside of here. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to, yes. Nope. 6 and 187, I think.
It's not the same.
It's what? Oh, this is actually an interesting one. Everybody come over here and look at this. So Aretha's actually got this going, and he's trying to crank these guys back, and he's actually not. He's actually on his RGB guy here. He actually hit cancel out of that to be on this layer here. But you can actually run into another problem, and it's something that I should have showed you about here today as well. If this is still an active selection, this will cause you problems. So for instance, go ahead and load this as a selection. So simply hit Command, click, and load it. Go ahead. And then when you put levels on here, go ahead and load levels. So Command L. What's now happening, you see how clipped this histogram is? And the reason this has happened is because this is an active selection. Because this is selected, it's only going to let him affect these highlight areas. It's completely shut this black area out to him. So if this happens to you, if you bring up the histogram dialog box to run this levels, and you see this sort of aberration, sometimes it's even worse than this. Hit cancel to come out of this, hit Command D to deselect, and then go right back into it, Command L for levels. And you'll see that you have the entire spade of the histogram to work with, which is what you need. So again, my values were 6 and 187, you'll be close. Okay, I just want to get to the end of this, and we got 5 minutes. Okay, so back to all of this. I'm simply going to double click the hand. I'm not going to worry. Oh, I was just going to clean up this one little edge that's right up here. So again, I'm on the pasteboard, the F key, which allows me to get to use a brush on the outside of this. Hit the B key to get to a brush. Make sure that this is a soft brush, because again, you don't want to spray that stuff in. I don't want to ruin this edge, so I do want to be spraying this in. I'm going to change my blending mode to overlay. I am going to hit the X key to get white as my foreground color, and I'm simply going to work at just taking part of that out. That got rid of that part. I'm going to look down here as well. I'm just running my cursor over this. I'm seeing I get occasionally a 254 in there, something like that. For the most part, though, that seems pretty clean. I'll just run it across there anyway. I've got problems on this other edge over here. I'm not actually going to go after these guys. I might take care of a little bit of this part, but other than that, I'm going to double click on the hand to jump out of here. I am then going to come over to my selective color. This thing has done its work. You don't need it anymore. You can throw it away. The hue saturation has also done its work. You don't need him anymore. You can throw him away. I am going to copy the background layer. I'm going to copy it, not throw it away. I'm going to copy the background layer. I'm going to click on the first of the background layers because I want to put a layer of white in between these two to see how good my knockout is. So I'm going to put a blank layer in between the two, just like this. Hit the D key to default my foreground colors to black and white. This time I'm simply going to hold down the Command and Delete key to fill my background with white. Finally, I'm going to hover over the knockout that I created. Oh, I didn't paint in the black of her hair, but we'll get to that. We'll see how good it is. I'm going to Command click to load this as a knockout. I'm going to come up to my top layer, and I'm going to simply add this as a layer mask. The mask is inverted. That's okay. Again, when it puts it on there, it also does a deselection for you. So Command I to actually do an invert. And you've got a girl that's got a whole lot of spill, but otherwise is actually really pretty well knocked out. Again, this will take you 5 minutes. To finally get rid of the spill, the exact way I just want to show you this, guys, one more time to get rid of the spill. This case, it is an issue of color, not an issue of luminosity like the girl on white was. So again, hit the B key to get a brush. You still want to make sure that this is a completely soft brush. We're going to change the blending mode from overlay down to color. I can't select color. Why? What is wrong? The mask is what is active here. It's actually got the brackets around the mask. You can't have color in a mask. Make sure that you select this layer, the pixel layer, the image layer, then overlay down to color. I'm going to hover over this girl's hair. I'm going to hold down the Option key to temporarily get the sample tool for the foreground color. I'm going to click on this, and you'll see that my foreground color is now changed to this kind of brown. When you do this kind of work, I'm going to zoom in. You want to repeatedly change your foreground color. If you use only one single color, it looks fake. You also don't want to change anything that's not already, that doesn't need to be changed. So for instance, I'm going to go after this little area of green right here, but you don't want to zoom in on this whole thing and start changing all of this hair color as well. This hair color here was never broken, so there is no reason to change that. You only want to change the part that is actually green. So I'm coming out here, and I'm actually just working my way in slowly. I'm going to get to this point, hold down the Option key, sample a new color to actually change this part. Come down to here. It's a little bit darker color in here. Sample a new color. I'm even darker still down here. Sample a new color. By the time I get next to her ear, I cannot use a soft brush anymore because I'll do that. I will take the color out of her ear. Command Z to undo that. You need to, this stage of the game, go to a hard brush to work around this edge of her ear. I'm also going to make it a smaller brush so it's not as hard for me to deal with. And again, then I'm going to do this work right around the edge of her ear. Zoom back out. Are you kidding me? You can hit this side of her hair over here to get rid of this spill. Again, I've got other issues that are going on down around this, but look at what we just did. Look at your screen at what you just did. Again, this is your ticket out. This is how you can leave Columbia with a career, a skill that is so far and away above what the majority of the people who are in this game are doing. Are there questions about this? All right, we'll see you guys next week. We didn't get to print profiling this week. We will do it next week, I promise. We'll start with it. Save this file. It's part of your homework in 2 weeks.